Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another amazing interview in our Reclaiming Our Spiritual Heritage virtual conference. It is my honor and my pleasure to share with you my friend, Rabbi Denise Eger. She is the founding rabbi, senior rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami in West Hollywood, even though she's retired just recently, and internationally renowned Jewish leader and activist for LGBTQ rights. So we're really delighted to have you with us today. Denise, thank you.
I'm so honored to be here and really newly retired, like this week.
Oh my God. I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah.
So let's just dive right in. First of all, thank you for your long service to the LGBTQ community in this crucial area. I know that you were the first openly LGBTQ person to be president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is the largest and oldest rabbinical organization in North America and representing 2,500 rabbis worldwide. That's pretty impressive. And maybe I'm projecting, but what an honor.
It was a huge honor. I mean, this organization is more than 160 years old.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty amazing.
You made history.
We did make history. In 2015, it was really radical. Remember, we were still just coming and fighting for marriage equality, even, let alone to rise to an important table in the Jewish community. And though it says the Central Conference of American Rabbis, it really is the International Rabbinical Association. So there are rabbis from Germany and Shanghai and Australia, New Zealand, Israel, South Africa, all through Europe. So it was a very big deal to
amazing. That's
to
so
represent
impressive.
and to represent in the Jewish community, and then outwards in interfaith organizations and in relationships with government entities as well.
And does that include Orthodox rabbis?
No, this is all Reform liberal rabbis.
Got it.
But you do sit at tables in the larger Jewish community with Orthodox organizations as the representative of this larger body of Reform Judaism, which Reform Judaism is the largest denomination of Judaism in North America. There are more than a million Jews. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot number, but the Jewish community is very small. We're less than 2% of the American population. So it's a very small population, and but yet for us, those are large numbers for our community.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
And
so how was it for you, like when you were representing representing the conference in other organizations and maybe had to share a table with an Orthodox?
Yeah, sometimes it was really difficult, not just in Jewish organizations. So one of the years I was president, our congressman in our home congregation is Congressman Adam Schiff, with many of your people will know from the hearings on January 6th. Congressman Schiff invited me to be his guest at the National Prayer Breakfast in 2017. So that happens in January, just after an inauguration. So who was inaugurated as president in January of 2017, none other than the former guy, I won't say his name, not to be too political. But I attended with Congressman Schiff. He's Jewish also. This National Prayer Breakfast, where there were hardly any Jewish people, was mostly evangelicals. And the president at the time addressed the group. So you can only imagine what this room must have felt like and looked like in terms of being basically pretty much far right-wing religious people. I always put religious in quotes when I talk about them because I don't think they really follow the tenets of the Bible, but that's a whole nother story, or maybe we'll get into that. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But
why not? Why not?
So sometimes we were put in pretty difficult situations, both out in the outer world, like that example of attending this National Prayer Breakfast sponsored by Congress, by the way, which is like a very interesting question about separation of church and state and how that works. And Congressman Schiff needed my support as a rabbi to be in that environment, right? It didn't feel safe as a Jew, and it's for me, it didn't feel safe as a progressive, or for me as a queer person. And then there were other moments just even in the Jewish world when you're talking with Orthodox folks. This is an interesting story. But one of the years when I was president, we go to Israel for a convention every 7 years. The Reform rabbis go to Israel. Was in Israel in 2016. And who was prime minister then? No one other than the same prime minister that is now, Netanyahu, Bibi Netanyahu. And we were negotiating at that time to have equality at the Western Wall in prayer, because liberal Jews are not given equality in Israel. In this way, it is only Orthodoxy that has has hegemony over religious decisions. So I was actually across the negotiating.
I didn't realize that. That's
yeah,
it's so
sad. Both the Reform and conservative Jews do not have official standing. Rabbis cannot perform a wedding. Only
what?
Only the Orthodox.
That is shocking to me.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? The only country in the world where I'm not recognized as a rabbi is Israel.
That's insane.
So I was negotiating with Bibi Netanyahu about the place for liberal Jews to stand at the Western Wall and to have a section, because it's become an Orthodox synagogue. Men and women have to be separate. You can't conduct prayer services there. So, he's a difficult person. So sometimes you have to use all of your spiritual patience in dealing with people who do not have our best interests at heart. Being a woman, being a liberal, progressive faith leader, being a lesbian faith leader. So
you're pushing boundaries all over the place.
Push boundaries. You have to push boundaries. We all do. I think queer people do in general. That's part of our DNA as queer people.
Well, let's go right back to talk a little, not a whole thing, but a little bit about the political, because that's one thing that we all learned from the feminist movement, is that the personal is political. And so let's talk about it too from a spiritual perspective. How do you weave all that into who you are and how you are in the world?
Well, for me, as a rabbi, as a Jewish person, social justice is very much a part of my faith. We see ourselves as partners with God in the ongoing creation of the universe. The universe wasn't finished in 7 days. No, Jews don't believe it. We're not literalists. So we don't literally believe in the Bible. I want to be clear about that in any way, shape, or form. And Reform Jews believe in the ongoing creation and revelation, that we learn new things. And we have to incorporate those new things into our lives. So, we believe that we're partners to make the world a better place. And you might have heard this mystical spiritual phrase, tikkun olam, which in Hebrew means repair and healing of the world. And that is our human task, to help repair the world, to fight for the underdog, to go out and to create a place, not just for Jewish people, but for the whole of humanity. Yes. And so that really stems from my spiritual roots and guides me in the work that I do, both on behalf of our LGBTQ plus community, on behalf of women, on behalf of impoverished, on behalf of the immigrant, the stranger in our midst. This is what people miss. And of course, in the Jewish Bible, which is what Christians call the Old Testament, and we Jews call the Only Testament, for us, the command that is given the most in the Bible is, one, to observe a Sabbath day, a day of rest and renewal, dedicated to God and family and community and friendships and self-repair and self-learning. And the second, welcome the stranger, because you were a stranger in the land of Egypt. To embrace the other, to embrace the immigrant, to make space at the table for others. And so, that really speaks also to the political world we're living in, right? Yeah. So, for the people that say, oh, politics is over here and my spirituality is over there, for Judaism, we really think about things in being whole and complete. We don't compartmentalize things. We have to put our whole selves, our whole bodies in the world. with our whole soul in the world.
I love that. I love how you speak about that. And isn't that, by the way, the emphasis on welcoming the stranger and openness to stranger, isn't that one the quote unquote sins that were misinterpreted
Totally.
to mean, same-sex relations?
This is the whole story of Sodom and Gomorrah in chapter 18 and 19 of Genesis, right? Where Abraham goes to this, pleads with God, will you save for the city, for the righteous people of, ultimately he bargains with God and, like 10 righteous people. If I can find 10 righteous people in the city of Sodom, God will not destroy it. Now, Abraham feels safe in that because his nephew Lot lives there and with his whole family. So he figures, I got this in the bag. but yes, the people of Sodom are inhospitable. And when you call somebody a sodomite, we're not talking about gay people. This has been completely misinterpreted. And we know this from ancient literature. The church completely misinterpreted this.
And do you think it was intentional?
Absolutely, it was intentional. Once the church fathers demanded celibacy of men who are priests, this is the repressed homosexuality within those ranks. Even in the 3rd century of the Common Era, the Jewish Greek philosopher Philo wrote that this traditional story we understand is that the people of the town of Sodom were inhospitable to the angels, these strangers that came and wanted to come to Lot's home. Lot extended hospitality. This was the Abrahamic custom, to open your home to the travelers, to the weary, to the immigrant. And Lot, his nephew, did so. But they came banging on the door to know them and used rape as a way to try and demand and destroy and demean and dehumanize the visitors, right? So this complete misunderstanding of the story. So welcoming the stranger is a core value.
Which I love, by the way. I used to teach in the college. I used to have to be a speaker in the college circuit and have one of my lectures was on LGBT and the conflict between sexuality and spirituality. Kind of the theme of this conference, the same theme as this conference. The other one was Beyond Belief, in which I was speaking about all the different paths to the sacred, which, I don't belong to any one religion. I honor them all and I challenge them all. And part of what I did in that lecture was I spoke about what touched me the most out of each of the different traditions. And for Judaism, it was the emphasis on family and those profound, profound bonds that you see all over the world. And then Tikkun Olam. I love that.
Well, anytime we're called to make tikkunim, with these repairs within our own spiritual selves and then in the world at large. And that we never really attain perfection. We're always a work in progress as human beings, right? But we're also supposed to be always learning and always engaging. And that essence of notion of that we can heal, that we can repair, that we can repair society as well, means that it's the ultimate statement of hope.
Yes.
Right? We're not damned to hell. You're not damned to hell because of who you are or who you love. Love is the most important gift, right? Yes. I mean, God created humanity in love according to Jewish teachings, we don't believe in original sin, right? Like that's a Christian overlay. Jews believe in ultimate love, that God created humanity in love.
Yes, and I don't believe in original sin either. And I don't believe in a final judgment. But if I were to believe in that, my question wouldn't be, whom did you love? But I would want to know, how much did you love?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how you treated that person. How did you treat the people that are in your sphere? Whether it's your workers, were you fair with your employees? Were you kind to your family? Did you raise up another generation to take responsibility? I mean, these are the questions that if there were a final judgment. And, I think, Christian, one of the things I want to just share with you and everybody who's attending today, like the notion of prayer in Judaism is not so much praying to God. We do have some prayers of praise and prayers of thanksgiving and prayers of gratitude, but the Hebrew word for prayer is lehit, comes from the idea of to judge oneself. Tefillah, the Hebrew word for prayer. It's about self-examination as well. So we do meditate. We do have meditation that's very much a part of our tradition. Musical prayer, chanting, and singing. But a prayer experience is also deep interpersonal and personal examination, both of your relationships with others, your relationship with the divine. And I want to be clear, I don't believe on anybody, on God with a beard on a throne. Those are anthropomorphized images, right? I really believe in the spirit of the universe that connects all life.
Yes,
and that is a very Jewish idea, and it's shared in other traditions, including Eastern traditions as well. So I want to be really clear about that. But
yeah, I'm with you. If we're talking about an old man in a white robe with choir of cherubims, then I'm out too. I'm an atheist too.
I'm out.
Micromanaging and busybody, but no.
God is not. We are not marionette puppets, and God is not a puppeteer.
Of course
right?
not.
No,
it doesn't make any sense.
But he would, so many of us grow up with those terrible images. And they get imprinted on us, and we don't know what to make. We don't know what to make sense of it. And people says, "Oh, come to me. Oh, Rabbi, I don't believe in God." I say, "I probably don't believe in that God either."
Right.
Tell me about the God you don't believe in. No, I don't believe in that one either. So
exactly, I've had so many conversations with people who call themselves atheists, and by the end of the conversation, it's like, "Hey, we're on the same page."
Right. It's not about it. I'm an atheist for that kind of God too. For me, there is a vibration, a harmony in the universe that connects all life, and it can be animal life, it can be plant life. It's not just it's not just human life, but but it does connect all humanity. And that vibration, that force, that spirit of the universe is what I call God, which is why I'm not expecting God to come down and manipulate me one way or the other, but does call me to do right in the world. Right. That same harmony challenges me to get in tune with the universe.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the purposes or the intentions behind this summit, this conference, is that still so many in our community, because of what we're talking about, because of these misunderstood and misinterpreted messages and teachings, like so many of us still struggle with spirituality because we confuse it with religion. And no wonder. Given the hand that we've received at so many religions in the world, I would even say most.
I agree with you.
But one of the ironic things about that is how throughout history and all over the world, people that we today call LGBTQ were not only spiritually inclined, but honored for that role of spiritual service and leadership that you embody. So I want to ask you, how did you know? When did you know? Did you have a calling to step into that rabbi, teacher, priestess role, for lack of another word?
We're definitely not priests. We're definitely more teachers and facilitators. That's what rabbi really means.
I know it means teacher, but it's more than just teaching.
I think for me, I did have a sense of calling from a young age. And I wouldn't say my parents were, they were observant. I don't know that they were particularly religious. They were involved, and, we went to synagogue pretty regularly, but they were just working people. My mother worked, my father worked, and synagogue was a safe place for me, even as I began to understand my sexuality.
At what age, more or less?
I by the time I was 12, I knew I was queer.
Wow.
I knew I was a lesbian. And but I grew up in the South, so you kind of have to hide it until you escape to California in college. In those years, it's not like today where kids come out in junior high and high school, and they know that they're in a different place, can say that they're gay or trans and take their partner to the prom. That didn't get to happen, right? but for me, I did have a sense of calling that I knew that I could make a difference. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. And of course, in 1968, Dr. King was assassinated there, murdered in cold blood there. And, it infects everything in Memphis as it should. And, I used to spend hours as a high schooler just out front of what was the Lorraine Motel. Now it's the National Civil Rights Museum, amazing place if people haven't been, worth of pilgrimage. But then it was, the motel was behind a chain link fence and crumbling and in disarray. And I just used to go down there and sit and like, well, how could that happen? How could that happen? How could that happen? And, and it really, I think the work he did, the work my rabbi did, who was head of the Interfaith Association at the time Dr. King was assassinated, and actually had invited him to come to help settle the sanitation strike in 1968 there. I mean, these were big influences to see that you could make a difference in the world. As I became a rabbi and came to Los Angeles in 1988 to serve as the rabbi for the queer community at the height of the AIDS crisis, our people didn't have very many voices, right? We were dying in droves. And there weren't openly queer people as religious leaders, other than Troy Perry, who embraced me and welcomed me in 1968 even though we were Jewish, he served as a mentor. Reverend Nancy Wilson as well. Some of these great leaders of our queer movement, religious movements and queer movements. So I think,
for somebody who may not know, founder of MCC, and the first moderator, and Nancy, the second moderator.
Yes. So, I guess we're called sometimes to times and places. In the book of Esther in the Bible, Esther was with a queen of Persia, and a plot rose against the Jews from the prime minister. And her uncle said, listen, you were put into a time and place, maybe just for this reason, to be able to speak up and save the Jewish community, and ask the king to repeal the decree against genocide against the Jews. And she does speak up at the pain of death. And sometimes I think, well, maybe I was put in a place also by a divine spirit to be able to speak and advocate for our community at a particular time.
Beautiful, powerful. And let me ask you one more question about that. For somebody who might be watching this and who may not be clear, may not have a sense of what we mean or what it feels like to have a spiritual calling, talk a little bit more about that. What did it feel like? How did you know?
I think for me, I didn't know what it would be, but I know that it was a place of, my Judaism was a place of great serenity, peace, and a place that helped me make sense of the world, a framework that helped me make sense of the world. And whenever we're teenagers, I think things are chaotic for every teenager. I think for LGBTQ teenagers growing up in a world that is primarily heteronormative, right? And you're really the outsider. I think it's that much more confusing. And to find something that brought me ultimate sense of peace on the one hand, of power, to be honest, of being able to make change, because to be able to do that as a teenager as well, to be involved in social justice activities, helped me to see that this might be a path forward, to be able to integrate who I am as a human being first and foremost. I think that's part of that feeling of when you are in a place where you can integrate all of yourself, and you don't have to compartmentalize your sexuality from your humanity, from your spirituality. We should never, this is dangerous for every human being on the planet, that our way our society is set up is that we're forced to compartmentalize so many places, and we can't be fully integrated human beings in the world. So I think that's part of what I feel like that God called me to do, is to be that integrated human being and integrate my sexuality and my humanity and my Judaism, and to share that with others.
Beautiful. And I know that you just retired from being a senior rabbi at a congregation, and that you're entering a different phase,
Yes.
and that you have also been expressing, um, and are going to continue expressing that teacher role in different ways. But in terms of the rabbi role in a congregation, senior rabbi, what do you like about that the most, and what inspires you the most about that?
Oh, well, I love the people, right? Everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, regardless of their age. They can be 90 or they can be 9. And they have a story to tell. And I think that that's something that I really love, is hearing and being part of people's life stories. I love to teach, and I love people's curiosity and questions. And I love discovering and exploring those questions together. And that, has been a powerful part of my rabbinate. I love to teach, and I teach a lot of different classes. So I think that's something that, without the day-to-day of having to fundraise and be an administrator and supervisor and all of
Right.
that, now as Rabbi Emerita, which means I'm the, I'm still around, but I'm not running the ship every day to day, will give you more time to write and to teach and to
Beautiful.
be able to do those things.
Yeah, and I want to get into your books pretty soon, but I want to ask you first, because I know that you're in a relationship, you're married to another rabbi.
Yes.
So what is that like?
Well, she's fabulous. Rabbi Ellie Steinman. She's the senior rabbi in Austin, Texas, and at Temple Beth Shalom, which is a mainstream congregation, not a queer congregation. My congregation's predominantly LGBTQ in West Hollywood. So she's at a very large congregation, and that's a real milestone, that LGBTQ
Yes.
rabbis and cantors, religious, are not just relegated to queer only space now.
Yes.
We've done the work in our denomination that I've led through these 35, nearly 40 years of activism within Reform Judaism, that LGBTQ people have no barriers to full leadership and participation within the Reform Jewish community. So here she is, an openly lesbian rabbi of a major congregation. It's the state capital.
Yes.
700 households, 400 kids in their supplemental religious school. So that's a very big deal. And, I think I understand her life, the day-to-day and the pressures and the trials and the successes and the joys. Can be of support, as she's been to me in my leadership roles, both nationally and internationally and locally.
And do you think, like, since you have a window into both settings, do you think that the issues that a rabbi deals with, whether it's a mostly hetero congregation or specifically queer one, is it the same stuff that people deal with?
People, at the end of the day, everybody's a human being.
Yeah.
They're dealing with grief and loss, with isolation or loneliness, health issues, graduations, life decisions, marriages, babies, right? Queer people have babies too, right? And I have to say, one of the things that's been is eye-opening is because of the work we've done and the safety that particularly our young people have in our liberal congregations, where they don't have necessarily in other communities. More and more LGBTQ people are choosing to become Jewish, studying to choose Judaism, because it is a place where you can express your spirituality fully and your sexuality fully without that shame, judgment, abuse. So that's something that we notice. And the other is that our young kids who are coming out younger and younger, and or coming out about their gender expression and gender identity, that it's a safe place for trans people. And in a state like Texas, it's not such a safe place, right? So there's young kids in her congregation where they use the name they aspire to, even if they can't use that name and identity at home, maybe, or even, certainly in their school setting. So it plays an important role to provide that safety.
Beautiful. Do you take turns leading the prayers at home?
At home, for sure. We definitely take turns at home. whether it's Shabbat and lighting candles, and we do them together often. And sometimes we can carve out time to study a text together, a Jewish text together, talk.
And you were just mentioning safe place for sexuality, and I know that in general, probably leaving the Orthodox branch out of it, that Judaism is really sex positive.
It is sex positive, and even among most of the Orthodox, it's sex positive. I mean, there are nuances there, obviously, and some places where LGBT sexuality isn't safe, but for the most part, Judaism is not Christianity that comes down upon expressions of sexuality. The Song of Songs is the deeply sexualized, erotic love poetry in the Bible, is one example, but also always has been that sex is seen as a mitzvah, as something that is joyful, and that human beings should engage in, and not just for procreation, right? Like,
yes,
that is
thank you.
Right. It gets framed in that right-wing evangelical political sphere as that sex is bad and sex is only for procreation. And that's just not true in Judaism. Our tradition recognized that pleasure mattered. And in fact, in the Talmud, it is framed around heterosexuality. So I do want to give that disclaimer around male-female sexual relations, but depending on the husband's occupation, there's actually a list of how many times a week, a month, a year, they must engage in sexual relations with their spouse, right? Like, so if you're a camel driver on a long caravan, it's less because you're not at home so much, right? You're like the traveling salesman. But if you're a scholar and you're at home every single day because you've gone and all you do is study all day, let me just tell you, it's more than once a week.
So how many times a week is it?
Well, I think it's up to the couple, right?
That's
but at the
funny.
end of the day, but I think that, like, can you imagine a Christian text that tells you must engage,
that it's mandatory,
and that you must enjoy it? Right?
I love it. So right, so let's take that a little deeper. Talk, because I know this is one of the areas that you're passionate about and teach about. Talk about integrating our sexuality and a spirituality.
Right. Well, listen, this is the secret, I think, to a happy life. If you don't have to pretend that your sexuality is something nefarious or bad or something you have to be ashamed of, right? This is the key. And for LGBT people, we're made to feel every single day that there's something wrong with the way we love. And there is nothing wrong with the way we love, any of it, right? Like, when there's a basic honoring and respect for the other person that or persons maybe that you're engaged with, that is the foundation, how we treat one another, right? And from there, then to be able to say that sexuality and the way we express our sexuality, the way we love, is a normal, expected human activity, reclaims our sexuality, right? Reclaims it, because why? We say, at least in Judaism, that we're created in the divine image. And if we love and we are created in the divine image, then our sexuality is an aspect of the divine. So when you are loving and being a loving person, physically loving, right? Physically engaged in respectful expressions of sexuality, then there's an aspect of divinity to it, holiness even. So that's that's a radical statement for most people, and for most queer people, to know that when you make love, when you have sex, that it's holy. There's a whole aspect of holiness to it. I would think most gay people would say, "You're crazy, Denise." But that is the Jewish approach to it. And I do say it has to be respectful. And I'm trying to speak really broadly because we have so many aspects to our community, right? Yeah. But it is about holding the other person in esteem and honor for their humanity, or persons. I don't want to say that polyamory is outside the tent. I don't think it is.
Yeah, for those who question whether sexuality and spirituality even belong in the same sentence or even a paragraph, I just ask, whose name is most commonly invoked at that point of orgasm?
Yeah, exactly. Oh God, right?
Yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
I think if you've ever had like great sex, no, I mean, there wasn't a question. That was an assumption, Christian, that you've had great sex, and that everybody here has had some time of point that had great, and that there's a moment of communion that you have with the other person and union. That I don't mean it's just the physical merging, but there is a spiritual merging that happens, a soul
Yes.
moment
Yes.
in that. And maybe it's only fleeting, maybe it's only a moment. And I'm not saying that you have to be in love and you have to be married or be life partner. That's not what I'm talking. Right? But there is a moment in a sexual exchange that is deeper than just the physical release, I
Yes.
believe.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
when you have experienced that, that is the moment of the integration of our sexuality and our humanity and our spirituality, right?
Yes.
And that communion is also how in Jewish tradition that we imagine the communion with the divine. And in fact, the whole mystical tradition in Judaism, the Kabbalists, and you might have heard of Kabbalah, that word mentioned, but their whole endeavor is to have communion with God. And it's described in the most sexual and erotic terms.
Mm.
Just like that moment
Yes.
of union and communion that one has in a really deep sexual experience.
Yeah. And I wonder
I
that,
want to be clear, not an abusive,
yes.
not one where there's a power imbalance, but one that is recognizing and is consensual and is a safe relationship for the partners.
Yes. Before I knew practices like meditation or breath work, the only time that I was able to pop out of my separate individual illusion of identity, right? Like that ego identity
Yes.
of separate personality and individuality. The only time that I popped out of that and had that communion with another was making love. That's
Right.
the only time that
Right.
I could experience.
And that making love, that moment is a teacher, right? Because we can do those things, as you rightly say, through breath work, through meditation. I would also say through prayer. You can have those moments of communion
Mhm.
with others
Yes.
and with the divine spirit that guides the universe.
Yes.
And
One of
that's the
my
challenge of spirituality. And I think for me, the challenge of religion, right?
yes.
To embody that and not to get so caught up in the strictures and institutions that have been layered on that often need to be stripped away.
I wrote a piece a few years ago titled Namaste in the Bedroom. And for that's my favorite concept from Hinduism is, is
Yes.
Namaste, that the sacred in me bows to and honors and sees that in you.
Right.
And then I added and makes love with that in you.
Absolutely, that makes
Yes.
love. That's exactly the moment. And I mean, that's Namaste. Is that we're in Judaism, we say we're all created, B'Tselem Elohim, we're created in the divine image. And it's my job to recognize that divinity in
Yes.
you.
Yes. 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 Yes.
That's Namaste in Judaism, right?
I love that. And these are my two favorite topics to talk about, especially combined. But I want to make sure that we get into your books before we run out of our allotted time together. So you've got 3 books and one that just came out. Congrats!
Yeah, thanks. One that just came out. I know. I'm very, very excited. We're excited about it.
Well, tell us.
Yeah. So I say we because I have a co-author on this book, Reverend Dr. Neil Thomas, who's the senior pastor at Cathedral of Hope in Dallas, Texas, who's my best pastor buddy, and which is
who was pastor at MCCLA.
He was, and that's where we did our first work in the both on the HIV/AIDS work and marriage equality work. We did a lot of work statewide to get marriage equality in California, of course, before it was national. And he moved to Dallas, Texas about 6 years ago, where he heads one of the largest churches in the United Church of Christ system, but it's primarily an LGBTQ church. And we wrote this great book. I think I'm really saying it is great because I really love it. It's 7 Principles for Living Bravely. I'm going to hold it up. I don't know if y'all can see it. We'll try and see if I don't have the blur on. So there we go. 7 Principles for Living Bravely.
Beautiful. I love the cover. And tell us about what living bravely means to you.
Well, yeah, we talk often, and we talked a lot during the lockdown of COVID-19, right? And one of the things we were realizing early on is that the work that we did during the AIDS pandemic in the late 80s and 90s, right? And especially before 93, before drugs came out and AZT became, something that helped everybody. And what we were experiencing in the early stages of the coronavirus pandemic were very similar. And, our society's gone through so many changes and it's affected so many people along the way. We really started to talk about what are the universal spiritual truths and wisdom that we share in common and that have been taught over millennia in our tradition, both Jewish and Christian traditions. And what we come to is that we think that these 7 principles will help people make sense a little bit of whatever season they find themselves in, right? Through getting through difficult times. So we explore 7 interfaith principles: mourning, not good morning, but MOURNING, right? How to grieve, mourning, truth, rest, love, prayer, joy, and hope. And we do that through our respective lenses. One of the things that often happens, Christian, in a book, in writing or in talking, is there gets to be what I call interfaith mush, right? It loses its particularism. Yes. It only looks at its universalism and becomes something other. So
I agree.
To honor the wisdom, which isn't always the same in both Judaism and Christianity, we each wrote from our own perspectives. So I wrote some of the chapters, Neil wrote some of the chapters, and then at the end of the book is a kind of a discussion of both of us. So I believe that the wisdom that's there from our universal truths, I think it's just going to benefit so many people, particularly in our LGBTQ people, who are on this journey that we call life, and how to try and overcome some of the difficulties, no matter what hardships you face.
Well, congrats. I know the work that goes into getting a book published, so it's like, I bow to you. And so
available on Amazon. Available on
Amazon.
Available on Amazon now, both in Kindle form, Kindle book or ebook form, and in paperback. And the Spanish version Spanish language version is just we're putting the final touches on the Spanish language version. So it should be out, and that should be out like momentarily.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about your other book about LGBTQ.
Well, the other book particularly for
Life and Ritual.
Life and Ritual, yeah, it's called Where Pride Dwells. It has a Hebrew name, Mishkan Ga'ava. And it's a celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual, but there's a lot here, even if you're not Jewish. So, in Judaism, we have a blessing for everything, right? From both ritual things like when the Sabbath begins, to lighting the Sabbath candles and saying blessings for there, but also for sacred moments in our lives. And everything is a moment for mindfulness. This is the Jewish aspect of mindfulness. So when you eat, you say a prayer before and a prayer after. When you get up in the morning, there's a prayer to thank God for renewing your day. Before you go to sleep at night, there's a prayer, right? There's prayers for everything. And you're supposed to say 100 blessings a day. So what I did in this book is rewrite and recreate and reimagine some of the prayers, both those that might have been heteronormative, let's say. So blessings for spouses at the Sabbath table. Traditionally, a husband blesses the wife blesses the husband, they bless kids. We reimagined those blessings for partners, and we imagined for a parent blessing my lesbian daughter. We imagined how to say a blessing when one comes out. Both blessings coming out as a lesbian or gay person, a blessing when you're coming out as a trans person. What happens as a trans person when you take your first hormone shot? Shouldn't that be a holy, sacred moment that we lift up and take a moment of pause and reflect about you're becoming the person you were meant to be? Yes. So we have we have a blessing for that, a blessing for chest binding. A blessing, wow. Right? A blessing for sacred holidays, queer holidays. Jews have a holiday cycle. We celebrate Passover in the spring, the liberation from Egypt, Hanukkah in the winter, and many other holidays. But there are queer holidays. what do we do for Pride, and how do we express that spiritually? So there's what do we do? What do we do for Passover, the ultimate story of liberation? Isn't there a queer angle to queer Passover? So there's stories in there. What about Harvey Milk Day in California? It's a state holiday, right? Harvey Milk's birthday, the great supervisor from San Francisco who was assassinated and murdered. He has a day dedicated to him. So how do we commemorate that day? How about National Coming Out Day in October? What would be spiritual prayers for that? World AIDS Day in December 1st. How do we mourn and mark our losses as a community? So the book also has a section for these sacred queer holy days and holidays, and to give voice both in poetry and song. And there's a few essays from activists like Evan Wolfson, who was one of the architects of marriage equality and who's Jewish, and Robin Tyler, who was also a great comic of our lesbian comic of our queer movement, and one of the plaintiffs in the California marriage case, reflecting about their Judaism and what it means to them. So
beautiful.
So I really, it's a wonderful resource book to imagine and reimagine liturgy and reimagine prayers in a queer voice.
And as far as I'm concerned, that is one of the most beautiful, what makes the most sense to me about organized religion is the structure, the life, the rituals, the community, the songs, the holy days, which help us to stay connected to the divine.
Yes.
And what a beautiful way of applying all of that to our community.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is, I think, part of the issue of loneliness and isolation. We're cut off from community, right?
Yes.
And we live in our own little buildings, our own little houses or apartments. We don't often have our families. Right? Queer people have been cut off from their families. We make families of choice, but sometimes those will stick and sometimes those don't.
Yeah.
So in a religious community, or a spiritual community, those people you share so much with, and to have these grounding moments that ground you to the earth, right? That ground you to these greater universal themes, like revelation, and like what is being revealed to you now, right? Is your sexuality being revealed? How do you reveal that to others in an appropriate way? And what are the morals and ethics and values that guide your life? And I think those are some of the good things that religion can offer us, and a structure to help us. But it has to be centered in queer voice, right? Or uplifting of queerness, and not dehumanizing of our queerness.
Yes.
And I think that's been part of my calling, part of what this second book that I just mentioned, Where Pride Dwells, also available on Amazon, tries to do, is ground us in our queer Jewish voices.
Do you have a favorite ritual from that book?
I have a favorite prayer. Could I read it to you?
Oh, please.
Because this was written at the time. He was a rabbinical student. He's now a rabbi in the couple of years. This came out in 2019, just as the pandemic was taking place. And we've revised some of the daily prayers in the Jewish tradition. So in a Jewish prayer service, there's always a prayer that speaks about our sacred ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, the first Jews, his son Isaac and his wife Rebecca, and then his son Jacob and his four wives, Sarah, Rachel, Rebecca, and Leah. And so this one's called A Blessing for My LGBTQ Ancestors. And it's a twist on that prayer, a queering of that prayer. You who fought to love, you who prayed to the same God I do, you who insisted on your dignity even when the world said you had none, you who died of AIDS while fighting for a cure so that people like me might live, you who were shot in a massacre while on a dance floor, you who could not come out and held your secret until your dying day, you who were insulted, shamed, beaten, and brutalized, yet kept walking, you who contributed your fierceness, your originality, your art, and your voice to this world, I walk in your memory. I walk this path smoothed and chartered by your sacrifice towards justice, towards holiness, towards freedom. Blessed are you, God, Sarah's helper and Abraham's shield. And together we say, Amen.
Amen.
Written by Rabbi Dave Yedid, a young queer rabbi. I'm so grateful for his work because we need to pay attention to our queer ancestors and our queer elders as well. They've given us a lot.
Profoundly, profoundly moving. And I can't think of a better way to wrap up our time together. And thank you for sharing your brilliance and your heart and the depth of your soul with us and your passion.
What a privilege to be with you, Christian. You do the same work through many, many decades. We've shared a lot together, both on the streets protesting and making change. And we share this mission of helping to heal and to help uplift queer people wherever we go. So thank you for what you do too.
So I can see your true face. A new day for the human race after centuries of shame. Remember us, our victories, examples of a higher being, a destiny, one in the same.